You ever have one of those mornings? You ever have one of those mornings, when everything's going to go right? You can just feel it. You wake up and your container for coffee is empty. So you think, I'm going to mix half a pound and half a pound for a special flavor. And in the mixing process, you end up with this. And it was all over the counter before I decided to film it. All of this, everywhere. Yep, I know it's going to be a good day today. Take it back. You know when it's going to be an extra fabulous day? When you do it twice. Good God. Well, I normally just take a regular cup of coffee, a coffee cup, and I like to throw some hot water in it so the cup's all ceramic so it keeps it all nice and warm. But the way today's going, we're going to switch. We got a sippy proof cup. It's a traveling cup. You can shut the cap, it won't spill. I think it's going to be one of those days. Who would have thought it would take a half hour or more just to get a cup of coffee? Unbelievable. It is what it is. So we need to start building some rafters. You can go online, you can search how to do this. There's a lot of different methods. What I'm going to teach you here is the basic math behind it. It's really simple. If you had algebra, you can remember the Pythagorean theorem. Basically, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Or in this case, we're going to use the run, the width of the wall, the rise, the height from the top of the top plate, basically to the top of your ridge or ridge beam, and your rafter length will be the hypotenuse, the long side of the triangle. We've decided on a 7/12 pitch. In other words, for every foot horizontal, we're going to go up 7 inches. That's a 7/12. That's kind of how you write it too. A lot of homes are 5, 6, but you get into like an A-frame, you might have a 9, 10 pitch, really steep. But we've decided on a 7/12 pitch. So here's the math for your pitch. You have a 7/12 pitch, and that's going to equal the rise divided by 5. Now, how did we get 5? If we look at our span on my building, span is from one corner to the other corner. That's 10 foot. If we drew an imaginary line right in half, exactly in half of that 10-foot wall, in my case, this 10-foot wall, the run is half of the span, is going to be 5 foot. So there's our 7/12 pitch equals the rise, or x, the unknown, divided by 5. And here's your math. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. You can pause it and look at it. But basically, we do cross multiplication. 7 times 5 equals 12 times rise. So we end up with 35. 7 times 5, 35, equals the rise. Now if you break that down, that comes out to 2.9166 feet, or 35 inches. Now there's an easier way if it's an even number like this, 10. We know we're going 10 foot is our span, so our run is 5 foot. And for every foot, we want to go up 7 inches. 7 times 5, 35 inches. Now you can break it down like this and go all through the extra math, but on an even run like this, 10 foot breaks down to 5. I want a 7 foot or 7 to 12 rise. I got 5 foot times 7, 35 inches. That's to the top of my beam now. So you have to subtract that beam. So what did we just discover there? We know our run, which is half the span. So our run is 5. Our rise is going to be 35 inches. So you can do this with quick, that's what we basically, the top portion we just did, determined our rise. So now we have the run, which we know is half the width of the wall. The wall was 10 foot, so the run is 5 foot. We now know the rise is 35 inches. So if we do the math, you can break it down for a squared, which would be a run or rise. So the run we did 5 squared. The rise is 35 inches squared. Comes out to 2.91 feet basically. Equals r squared, which is going to be our rafter. I used r as rafter squared. Here's the math. 5 squared is 25. 2.9166 squared, or times itself, equals 8.5065, equals the rafter squared. We take that, add these together is 33.5065. We take the square root of that. Same with the rafter. Square root of r is going to be r. So our rafter length, if we're going to be really exact, is 5.7884 foot. Now you got to convert that, because for every foot in an architectural, a foot is divided into 10 segments. On a measuring tape, we divide that into inches, or 12 segments. So you have to do the funky math, which comes out to 5 foot 9.5 inches. Now, there's such a thing out there. You can study this and look at it and try to figure. And this length is going to be not to the end of your tail, but where the end of the rafter would end at the end of the wall, i.e. the end of the bird mouth. So you got to figure that out if you're familiar with bird mouths and how to cut those. But the basic theory is you can figure this with just a simple calculator on a simple run. You know, a 5 foot wall, I want to go up 7. 7 times 5 is 35 inches. Real easy to figure my height. So now I have my run, which was 5 foot. My rise is 35 inches. And if you use the Pythagorean theorem, we can figure out the long side, the hypotenuse, if you will. In our case, we're going to be the rafter. That long one is the hypotenuse. Fairly simple. If you've had algebra in the past, it's a pretty simple concept. But I'm going to show you an easier way. After you have solved your rise and your run, this first top part that we did, they got such a thing as a building calculator out there. And I'll show you how easy it is. Now for the easy way. So we need the 2 legs, which is going to be the rise and the run. So let's figure the run, which is half the span, we know is 5 foot. So I'm going to go 5 feet and that's going to be my run. And then I'm going to go, my total rise is going to be 35 inches. I punched the rise. It locks that variable in. So now we have the run loaded in a memory variable, and we have the rise in a memory variable. Watch this. All we have to do is push the diag button. Bam. There's our rafter length. Now there's a little bit more details to all of this, right? So if you have a 2x8 rafter or a rafter beam, that 1.5 inches has to be divided by 2. So 3/4 of an inch would be subtracted, because that imaginary line of 5 foot exact is not true. So you have to subtract that ridge beam out, the half on each side of that imaginary 5 foot line there. And same with your wall. Your wall was measured with rough lumber, let's say the framed portion of the wall. So you're going to have a 10-foot wall, but then you add sheathing on the outside. It could be 1/2 inch, it could be 1/4. Let's just say it's 1/4 inch on each side, for a total of another 1/2 inch on your span. So now your true run, half of that, would be 5 foot and 1/4 inches. So it's a little bit more trickier than that, but for the most part, you guys get the idea. In this building calculator, there's a couple of them out there. They sure save you a lot of time there and math trying to figure that hypotenuse angle, or in our case, the rafter length. And you will have to add the rafter tail onto this length, and basically that the end of your bird mouth should be the end of the, or flush with the wall, that horizontal, no, it'd be the vertical angle there, should be parallel with your wall. So you want a little extra, whatever you decide you have your tail length, if it's going to be 5 inches, 8 inches, whatever. Need to add a little extra, and it's always better to have a little extra in case you make a mistake on your first angle cuts, and go from there. But that is the simple way of doing it, and hopefully you caught on to the run and the rise of how easy, instead of doing the math. In other words, if I had an 8-foot 8/12 pitch, all I have to do is go 8 times 5 is 40 inches. I know my rise immediately. It takes some practice, but once you understand it, it becomes old hat, and it's pretty simple.